Okay, so in the last episode, we were talking about different criteria for engagement, which the criteria may overlap with each other and draw on each other, but they're different aspects and they're kind of useful to help us understand engagement. And we spoke about two. One is this very central thing about seeing the other person as a person, and the second was being involved yourself in the seeing in order to see and in order to engage. So there's four other criteria left that I listed. And the third one is not focusing on the self. Now, you don't just engage with people, you also engage with anything, with things, with sunsets and with toys and with the wind in your face as you ride on a bicycle, or with the movement of the clay as you're throwing a pot. It's my new passion. But somewhere in all of these kinds of engagement, including the engagement with persons, some people argue that what's really necessary is a blurring of the sense of self and the sense of other, where the relation between you or the situation, the moment, becomes primary, rather than I am enjoying this bike ride, or I am enjoying the feeling of this clay, or isn't that a beautiful sunset out there? There have been studies looking at how regular runners on a very particularly beautiful beach in Australia, describe the kinds of feelings they have of the grandeur and beauty of the scenery when they're completely lost in it and are not exactly observing it, right? And this distinction has been referred to as a kind of an ecological awareness of the beauty of the scene, of the other person, where you are in it. You're in that relation, as opposed to outside of that relation, observing it. And it would seem that in order really for engagement to be rich, to lead somewhere, to be fulfilling, to mean something to both, you and I kind of have to be in there in that moment together. Okay. Sometimes this is easy. There's fluency and there's harmony in this relation of self and other person. Let me go back to persons because that's kind of what we're talking about mainly. Where we are conscious of being, you don't lose the consciousness that you are, but you're also consciousness of the other, but without a particular focus on yourself. You're conscious, if you like, of the space between you and the other. And sometimes when this happens, I don't know whether you've ever experienced this. You're having a conversation with someone, and you've got very half-baked thoughts popping up in your head. But because that conversation has, for some reason, been going really well, your half-baked thought is picked up by the other person and enlarged, built up a little bit more, and you can latch on, and a new thought is born of the fact of that other person perceiving your thought, and so on and so forth. It can be a feeling, it can be how you relate physically to each other, emotionally, with ideas, in whatever way. But sometimes this kind of fluency of relation leads to richer ways that simply could not have been predicted, and it's very easy. At other times, and they're rare, those moments, and you treasure them when they happen, but at other times, you need to make an effort to jump to focus on the other, to focus away from yourself. And that can be for a number of different reasons, because you're so anxious, because you're so afraid, because you're so angry. I was watching, in one of my weaker couch potato moments, a Jeremy Kyle show where there was this mother and daughter, and if I remember correctly, the mother was really angry, and that's why they came onto the show. The mother was really angry because the daughter, she said, had stolen some jewelry. And this guy, this Jeremy Kyle guy, had behind the scenes knowledge that what was actually happening with this teenage daughter was that she'd been sexually abused by someone significant. Now, the mother didn't know this. And in order to fix the relationship, he reveals it in the moment. But even with that incredible revelation of something in her family, to her daughter, in her house, the mother was so protected by the emotion that she was so intensely feeling. She couldn't give anything other than a kind of a cursory, "Oh, is that so? But she stole my jewelry." Okay? And okay, this is an extreme case, but in many more minor cases, you see it all the time. Your son comes in wanting to show you some flower that he's picked up from the garden, and he traipses mud all over the kitchen floor you're in a rush, you're trying to get the tea ready, you're trying to do this, that, and the other. All you can see is the mud. What you're doing is focusing on self. So it's a kind of a very common thing, this being unable to get away from the self. And sometimes we need it to protect our own illusion of competence. Kids do it too. No, I didn't get it wrong. I did it that way. You tell fibs to kind of protect your ego and to protect sometimes shaky beliefs. Let's say you have an academic theory and you're trying to argue this in a conference. Somebody challenges it and you can kind of see a glimmer of like, oh no, that's a point. But what you do because you're so afraid or because you feel so vulnerable is block that off by denying it in some superficial way because you can't entertain it. And what's happening there is the self and its emotions are really, if you like, causing your focus not to be able to leave you, not to be able to go beyond you, to relate, to engage.